My name is Mitch Waldow. I'm native of Los Angeles. So I grew up in the 60s, 50s and 60s and 70s. And some of you in this audience might remember festival seating at concerts. They called it festival seating. It's really no picnic, but it was a festival because you would sit in the open on your rear ends, usually in the hot sun, as the groups would play at the stadiums. And so there was this one concert at Anaheim Stadium. This would be probably around 1971, I would guess. And it was a great bill. It was The Who. It was Blues Image, Leon Russell. Quite a lineup. And, I bring that up. There's a record collector magazine. This month is all about Leon Russell. I'd never seen him. I'd heard him, but I'd never seen him before. And he was quite a great act. And Blues Image, of course, was really good. So I went with 4 other guys in a Chevy 2. A Chevy 2 was like a cheap version of a Chevelle, which was a cheap version of a full-size Chevy. And we were tooling along from the Fairfax district here down to Anaheim. And this car was a real dog. I mean, you really had to press that accelerator to get it going. So we arrived there. And it's festival seating. And so we're in the, I guess I was somewhere around between first and second base. I don't know, somewhere way out there. And it was getting very crowded and it was getting very hot. Must have been in the mid-90s at least, and the concert hadn't started yet. And there's a guy, and this is all part of that scene, there's a guy walking through the crowd with an apron opened like this, and he's throwing what he said was orange barrel sunshine acid, like chicken feed, out to the crowd. And people are grabbing it and I don't know, I didn't really trust him. I don't know why, but others did, including the 4 other guys I was with. They all trusted him. So they all dropped that stuff. And within a very short time, maybe a half hour or so, things really got hot. It got too hot for some of the girls in that crowd because they started taking off their clothes. I couldn't really see the stage too well, but I could see some of the girls that were sitting around me, and that was a lot more interesting to this young man. Anyway, so the concert finally starts, Blues Image opens, and then Leon Russell. Leon Russell's great. If you've ever seen him live, nobody really knew who he was. He had just started getting a little airplay. Of course, he had been a session musician for years, but nobody really was familiar with him. He was just starting to get a little radio play. And he starts out with a little bit of a little classical riff. And then he bangs and he does like a Jerry Lee Lewis number. He goes, I bet you didn't think I knew how to rock and roll, that sort of thing. So he's going on. And then I noticed my 4 buddies are starting to they're writhing around on the ground. And the fellow whose car it was in really bad shape. And he started to scream and cry. And I said, this is really a problem here. I better, there's a phrase in those days called babysitting, where you take somebody who's on a bad trip and you take care of them. And I was the babysitter, having been the one who didn't drop that bad acid. And so trying to get out of the middle of even the infield on a hot, crowded day in that festival seating, stepping over half-naked bodies, and many of them were also writhing on the ground, just like my friends were. And I finally get up to the stands. We get up to the stands where there's shade, and we're sitting in the shade, and he's a real mess, and he's starting to cry, I gotta go. I said, I'm gonna have to take him back to the car and babysit him in the car. And so take him outside, we leave the stadium, go into the parking lot, sitting in the car with him as he's saying, I'm never going to go again. My mother. Oh. He's just giving me his sad story because he's totally freaking out. And then over the wall of Anaheim Stadium, I can hear The Who. And I could just kind of hear it with a little bit reverberating over the walls. And my one chance to see the Who back then, that was the one chance I had. So one of the people here talked about growing up, and the kid who was really into punk with the long hair, who shaved his head. Well, this guy who was on the really bad trip had long hair, and after the bad trip, he shaved his head, and that because he was going to go totally straight, except he was still a Leon Russell fan, and it was a moment for me because I'd been to a number of concerts, and it's the atmosphere sometimes more than what you're seeing up on the stage. It's the people and everything else. This was the very last festival seating that I ever went to. Thank you.